here at this lecture. I'm Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology of the Institute of Lutheran Theology, and we're talking about Leibniz, and this is part of a course dealing with the philosophical presuppositions of theology and how philosophy does affect theological thinking. And of course, part of that is just to look at these thinkers and try to capture some of what they're thinking. Leibniz, who lived from 1646 to 1716, is a serious thinker, of course. And we've now brought ourselves in this group of lectures up to the point where we're looking at the simple substance, and we're trying to understand what it is that makes a simple substance for Leibniz. That is, what is the unity? What is the principle of unity of the simple substance? Now, what Leibniz claims is that a soul, or a substantial form, and he seems to use those somewhat interchangeably, underlines the complete individual concept of each simple substance. There has to be some there to which all these truths append, right? And he writes, something lacking extension, now if I say lack extension, that means not a body, right, is required for the substance of bodies. Something incorporeal, then, is required for the substance of bodies. Then he goes on to say, otherwise there would be no source, principium, for the reality of phenomena or for true unity. Now, then he says, but since atoms are excluded, what remains is something lacking extension, analogous to the soul, which they once called form or species. So there is a substantial form, and I'm reminded here of Descartes in the Meditations talking about wax and the form of how you have an intellectual apprehension of the substance wax, and it has these different modifications. There is an intellectual apprehension here of a substantial form or a soul, according to Leibniz. Body or matter alone cannot individuate a substance. Now, Leibniz is going to go certainly against Descartes. For, of course, Descartes believes that corporeal bodies exist, the essence of which are extension. This is something that Leibniz denies. He claims that nothing divisible can be a substance. A body, a corporeal body, is divisible, therefore it cannot be a substance. You've got to have something there to which truths append, right? Bodies can be aggregates of substances, but they themselves are not substances. Leibniz writes, I hold that philosophy cannot be better reestablished and reduced to something precise than by recognizing only substances or complete beings endowed with a true unity, together with the different states that succeed one another. Everything else is only phenomena, abstractions, or relations. Right? When he gets really down, he says, or relation. I can remember my Kant classes in graduate school and talking about Leibniz and setting up for Kant. It was always relations, you know. Kant wanted to bring relations back because they'd been taken away by Leibniz. Okay. Leibniz holds that bodies are thus mere phenomena. So he distinguishes unum per se from an unum per aggregationem. That is a unity in itself from an aggregated unity. And he talks about material bodies as aggregated unities. They're not unities in themselves. But bodies are thus analogous to rainbows, right? We regard a rainbow as one thing, even though it is a result of light, refracted through innumerable water droplets. But we regard it as one thing. In the same way, we regard, a body here as one thing, even though it's really not that thing. It's a refraction of perspectives and perceptions, as we're going to find out. Simple substances ground the phenomenon of bodies in the world, but bodies in the world are not simple substances. So we have the unity of a simple substance, and then, of course, every simple substance has an activity. It acts. A substance is a being capable of action, according to our good friend Leibniz. Cartesian corporeal substance cannot be a source of activity, right? It's dead. It's matter. Actions pertain to supposita. The supposita is that which carries predicates. Only something that is the subject of predication can be active, but only true unities can be the subject of predication. So these subjects of predication, right, remember, here's Alexander, he's a subject of predication. There's a unity of Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great is active, right? Cartesian corporeal substances, matter with extension, cannot constitute this, supposita. There's nothing to hang on to. Just matter. If you just think about matter, there's nothing to hang on to in matter. It's just matter. It's got to be something before you can hang any truth on it. And then by the time you get there, you have a unity, and then you can talk about activity. Something is active, according to Leibniz, if and only if the ground of its activity arises within itself. Well, this happened with Alexander the Great, right? The ground of his activity arose within himself. He decided to do this, and he decided to do this. Oh, I think I'll conquer this today. It's Thursday. It's a good day to conquer. That's how it is. Only minds, then, or mind-like things, can originate and alter themselves. Only minds and mind-like things are the true subjects of activity. Wow. Now he writes, every individual substance has primitive active and primitive passive powers. The active power is the substantial form, or the soul, and the passive power is matter. So the active power is here, coming out of the soul. Now we're going to see that this matter presents us with a kind of an interesting notion here when we get to monads. We'll get there very quickly. He claims that as well that the very substance of things consists in a force for acting and being acted upon. The active force is, quote, an inherent law impressed by divine decree. Okay, whoa. All of a sudden we got God out here. There's this action coming out of this substance, and somehow God is decreeing this. This all gets interesting. He writes, I think that it is obvious. You always want to run from a philosopher when he says obvious. I think that it is obvious that primitive forces can be nothing but the internal strivings, tendentia, of simple substances. Strivings by means of which they pass from perception to perception in accordance with a certain law of their nature, and at the same time harmonize with one another, representing the same phenomenon of the universe in different ways, something that must necessarily arise from a common cause. Okay, so now we got a substance over there. It's a unity, active, one over there. Unity, active, one over there. And we got God, and now God's going to end up coordinating all these substances. This gets us into his doctrine of pre-established harmony. Since substances are minds, their modifications are representations or perceptions. He uses those interchangeably. The activity, not completely, but it's close enough. The activity of a substance will thus relate to its succession of perceptions, its mental life, if you will, its representations. Now, this is the last thing I'll say in this little lecture. God programs substances such that they have an active force moving them from perception to perception. This is called appetition. So God bestowed upon Alexander the Great, when God created Alexander the Great, a certain appetition, which now is an active force, moving them from perception to perception, making Alexander Alexander, and that's why he conquers and does all these things. And Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology. Come back soon for more on Leibniz. Thank you.